The kitchen light flickered at exactly 1 a.m. But this story doesn't begin at night. It begins on a bright Tuesday afternoon, when Chidi Adeyemi walked into his own kitchen and found his housemaid crouched behind the refrigerator, swallowing spoonfuls of rice so fast she didn't even hear him enter. What he saw in her eyes in that frozen second, not guilt, but terror, would haunt him long after he learned the truth behind it. Chidi Adeyemi was a name known across Lagos business circles. At 38, he had built a logistics empire from nothing, the kind of story magazines loved to print. The boy from Ajagunle who now owned 3 warehouses, a fleet of trucks, and a glass-fronted mansion in Ikoyi that caught the afternoon sun like a mirror. He was a man used to control, every meeting scheduled to the minute, every contract read twice, every member of his household staff interviewed personally before hiring. So when he stepped into his kitchen that Tuesday afternoon to grab a bottle of water before his next call, the last thing he expected was to find Ngozi, the quiet woman who had cleaned his house for the past 4 months, crouched low behind the fridge door, eating leftover jollof rice straight from a plastic container with her bare fingers, glancing toward the doorway every few seconds like a woman checking for a storm. If you believe kindness has a way of finding the people who need it most, and that second chances can change everything, take a second right now to like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Whispering Tales Stories. Because this story is about to show you exactly what compassion looks like when it costs something. Chidi didn't shout. He didn't even move for a long moment. He simply stood there, watching this woman he had exchanged maybe 40 words with in 4 months, and something in his chest tightened, in a way business losses had never managed to do. Ngozi, startled, dropped the container, and rice scattered across the marble floor she had mopped that same morning. She began apologizing before she even stood up straight, saying she would replace the food, that it wouldn't happen again, that she was sorry, the word tumbling out of her like it was the only one she trusted anymore. Chidi noticed her hands were shaking, not from fear of losing her job, but from something closer to hunger itself, a trembling that came from a body that hadn't eaten properly in longer than anyone should admit. He asked her gently when she had last eaten a full meal. She looked at the floor and said she'd had breakfast. He asked again, this time softer, and reminded her that he wasn't angry, only concerned. It took nearly a full minute of silence before she admitted that she hadn't eaten breakfast either, that she had been saving her small monthly wage entirely for her younger brother's school fees and her mother's hospital bills back in Enugu, and that most days she survived on whatever was left in the pots after the family had eaten, timing her meals around moments when no one was watching, because eating in front of them felt like taking something that wasn't hers. Chidi sat down at his kitchen island, the same island where his interior decorator had once argued for imported Italian marble, and for the first time in years, he felt genuinely ashamed of his own home. He asked Ngozi to sit too, and she hesitated, unused to being offered a seat in a house where she was paid to remain standing. When she finally sat across from him, he asked her to tell him everything, not as her employer, but as a man who suddenly needed to understand how someone could work under his roof for 4 months while quietly starving in his kitchen without him ever noticing. Ngozi's story unfolded slowly, the way painful truths often do, in fragments rather than paragraphs. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving her mother to raise 3 children alone on a market trader's income. She had come to Lagos at 22 with dreams of studying nursing, but those dreams had been quietly buried under the weight of hospital bills after her mother's diagnosis with a kidney condition that required regular dialysis. She sent nearly 80% of her wages home every month, keeping barely enough for transport and the cheapest gari she could find. She had never told anyone in the house because she didn't want pity, and more than that, she didn't want to be seen as a burden, someone who couldn't manage her own life. She had learned to make herself small, to eat quietly, to ask for nothing, believing that gratitude for having any job at all meant she had no right to admit she was struggling. Something shifted in Chidi as he listened. He thought of his own mother, who had once cleaned offices in Surulere to keep him in school, who had eaten the smallest portion at every meal and called it not being hungry today, a lie he only understood as an adult looking back with a heavy heart. He recognized in Ngozi's silence the same silence his mother had carried, and he realized that his success, the very same success he was so proud of, had somehow built walls high, enough that a woman could go hungry inside his own home, without him noticing until she was caught mid-bite behind a refrigerator. He did not offer her money that afternoon, though money would come later. Instead, he did something that surprised her far more. He asked her to eat properly, right there at the island, and he sat with her while she did, asking about her brother's favorite subjects in school and her mother's condition, treating her not as staff to be managed but as a person to be known. It was the first real conversation many weeks had allowed either of them, and by the end of it, something had quietly repaired itself in the atmosphere of that kitchen. In the days that followed, Chidi restructured more than just Ngozi's pay. He increased her salary substantially, arranged for her mother's dialysis to be covered through a hospital he had connections with, and set up a separate account for her brother's school fees so she no longer had to choose between her own meals and her family's survival. But more than the financial changes, he changed the culture of his household, instructing his cook to always prepare enough for the staff to eat freely and without shame, and making it clear that no one under his roof would ever again need to hide behind a refrigerator to feel like they deserved food. Word of what Chidi had done spread quietly among his staff, then among his business circle, not because he announced it, but because Ngozi herself began to change, walking taller, smiling more easily, eventually enrolling in evening nursing classes. With the encouragement and support he offered, colleagues who noticed his shifted demeanor toward his own staff began asking questions, and slowly, Chidi found himself talking more openly about dignity in the workplace, about how wealth means nothing if it doesn't teach a man to see the people closest to him. 2 years later, Ngozi completed her nursing certification, and Chidi was there, in the back row when she received it, having quietly funded not just her tuition, but her confidence to finish what she started. She often said that the moment he found her behind that refrigerator was the moment 2 lives changed, hers, because she was finally seen, and his because he was finally reminded of who he used to be before success made him forget to look closely at the people around him. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that kindness still changes lives. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Whispering Tales Stories so you never miss a story like this one. Before we close this chapter, drop the word kindness in the comments below if you believe everyone deserves to be seen, no matter how small their voice or how quiet their struggle. In the end, Chidi Adeyemi's fortune was never measured in warehouses or trucks or glass mansions catching the Lagos sun. It was measured in a kitchen on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when he chose to kneel beside a frightened woman instead of walking past her, and in doing so, gave her back not just a meal but her dignity, her future, and the simple, unshakable truth that she had always been worth more than she believed.